When Mark discovers his wife Claire's secret affair, his world shatters, leaving him grappling with betrayal and anger. Determined to uncover the truth, he unearths shocking evidence of deceit and plans his retribution. But as the pieces fall into place, a devastating revelation threatens to unravel everything he thought he knew, not just about Claire, but about his own family. With justice and heartbreak colliding, Mark must navigate a path through lies, revenge, and an ultimate twist that will change his life forever. A gripping tale of love, trust, and the unyielding strength of a father's devotion. The morning started like any other, a cacophony of alarms, rushing feet, and the smell of brewing coffee filling the air. Claire moved gracefully through the kitchen, her blonde hair tied in a loose bun, her laughter floating toward our children like music. She always had this way of making chaos seem harmonious. But that day, there was an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, or how her gaze lingered on her phone just a fraction too long. I ignored the unease tightening my chest. After all, life was demanding. Our two kids, Julia and Ethan, had school, Claire had her marketing job, and I had my own workload managing IT systems for local businesses. Yet, even amidst our busyness, Claire and I had a rhythm. We communicated, planned vacations, argued about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, all the mundane things that stitched a family together. At least, that's what I thought. That night, the first thread began to unravel. Claire came home late, something she attributed to a client dinner. Her excuses were plausible, after all, her role often demanded entertaining clients. But when she walked through the door, something felt off. Her hair was slightly mussed, her usually impeccable lipstick slightly smudged. And her scent, a new, unfamiliar perfume, lingered long after she disappeared upstairs. Rough day? I asked when she returned to the living room. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before flashing me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Exhausting. You know how clients can be. I nodded, forcing myself to believe her words even as my gut churned. After all, she hadn't given me a reason to doubt her before. Or had she? I dismissed the thought. Overthinking never led anywhere good. 2 weeks passed before suspicion whispered its warnings again. It started with her phone. Claire had always been the kind of person to leave her phone face up on the counter, replying to messages without a second thought. Lately, though, it was different. The phone now stayed in her pocket or bag, and she would angle the screen away whenever I passed. I couldn't pinpoint why, but it set my nerves alight. Then came the message that shattered my oblivion. I was cleaning the kitchen late one evening when Claire stepped into the shower, leaving her phone forgotten on the counter. A soft chime broke the silence, drawing my gaze. On the screen, a message previewed, "Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. N." The room seemed to tilt. My heart pounded so loudly I feared Claire might hear it from the bathroom. Who was N? My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, waiting for it to unlock automatically or for another clue to reveal itself. But the phone remained locked, its dark screen taunting me. When Claire emerged, wrapped in a towel, I'd already turned back to the dishes. The phone remained where she left it, but my mind was a storm. "Everything okay?" she asked, drying her hair. "Fine," I lied, my voice steady, even as the truth burned behind my ribs. That night, sleep eluded me. My mind replayed the message, each word slicing deeper. Who was this person she couldn't wait to see? Had I been blind to her drifting away? Or worse, had I been a fool to trust her at all? The next day, I resolved to uncover the truth. The search began innocuously enough, scrolling through her social media, checking her public posts, even scanning through old photos. Nothing seemed out of place. Claire was the picture of a devoted mother and wife, her online life an endless stream of family milestones and work achievements. But then came the credit card statements. That's where the cracks in her story widened. Hidden among the grocery bills and utility payments were charges that didn't make sense, dinners at high-end restaurants, boutique hotel stays, and, most puzzling of all, a $3,000 purchase at a jewelry store. It was the first time I'd heard of her buying jewelry without consulting me. As the days turned to weeks, I pieced together more inconsistencies. She'd claimed to be out with colleagues one evening, yet her location on our shared app placed her miles away in an unfamiliar part of town. A quick search revealed the address belonged to an upscale lounge. Finally, the tipping point came on a Friday night. I overheard her on the phone in the study, her voice lowered to a conspiratorial murmur. "I'll see you soon," she said. "No, he doesn't suspect a thing." I felt as though I'd been punched in the gut. My instincts were right. The woman I'd built my life with was lying, betraying everything we'd vowed to uphold. Fury bubbled beneath my skin, but I forced myself to stay calm. Confrontation wouldn't yield the answers I needed, proof would. I needed to know the extent of her betrayal before I acted. That night, I waited until she was asleep and unlocked her phone. The messages were there, a sordid archive of secret rendezvous and whispered promises. N was no longer just an ominous initial, he had a name, Nathan, and he'd been meeting my wife for months. I closed her phone, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. How had this happened? How had I missed the signs for so long? In that moment, I vowed two things: to protect my children from the fallout and to ensure Claire would face the consequences of her actions. With a heavy heart, I returned the phone to her nightstand, careful not to wake her. The road ahead was clear. Revenge was not just an option, it was inevitable. The following day, my resolve hardened. I wasn't a man who made decisions lightly, and this wasn't the time for half measures. Claire's betrayal was like a festering wound, and the only way to heal was to confront the truth, and deliver the justice she had earned. But not yet. The plan needed precision. Patience. I began my day as usual, preparing breakfast for the kids while Claire showered upstairs. The smell of sizzling bacon and the sound of Julia and Ethan squabbling over the last pancake offered a semblance of normalcy, even as my world had begun to crumble. Claire descended the stairs in her usual rush, dressed impeccably for work, hair freshly styled. "Thanks for breakfast, love," she said, kissing my cheek absently before turning to Julia. "Don't forget to bring your science project home today. I want to see it." I forced a smile, nodding. "Have a good day." "You too," she replied, grabbing her purse. "Love you." The words felt like daggers. How could she lie so effortlessly? I clenched my jaw as the door clicked shut behind her. My time to act was drawing closer. That evening, I called an old friend, Matt, who worked in private investigations. We hadn't spoken in years, but if there was anyone I trusted to be discreet, it was him. "Matt," I said after the pleasantries. "I need your help." His tone turned serious. "What's going on?" I hesitated, feeling a pang of shame for even needing this conversation. "It's Claire. I think she's seeing someone else. I need to know for sure." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, man. Are you certain?" "I saw the messages. I know she's been meeting someone named Nathan, but I don't know how far it's gone. I need evidence, for the divorce." Matt exhaled. "All right. I'll handle it. Just give me her schedule, the guy's name, and any details you have." By the time I hung up, the weight on my chest lifted slightly. Matt's calm assurance gave me confidence. I wasn't just guessing anymore. Soon, I'd have the truth laid bare. The next few days passed in a surreal haze. I maintained my routine, playing the part of a loving husband and father while Matt worked behind the scenes. Every interaction with Claire felt like a performance, each kiss and laugh underpinned by a growing sense of betrayal. Late Thursday night, Matt called. "We've got him," he said. "Who?" "Nathan Parker. Works in finance. Divorced. Lives about 20 minutes from your place. They've been meeting at his apartment and a couple of boutique hotels in the area. The words hit like a fist. Hearing it confirmed was a gut punch, but it also ignited a flame of determination. What else? I've got photos, timestamps, the works. She's been at his place 3 times in the last week alone. And, Mark, it's not just dinners. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. I need everything you have. You'll have it by tomorrow. I'm sorry, man. I muttered my thanks and hung up. The final piece of the puzzle was in place. On Friday evening, Claire walked into the house later than usual, her hair slightly disheveled and her cheeks flushed. She looked radiant, happy, even. It was a stark contrast to how I felt. Sorry I'm late, she said, setting her bag down. Work was crazy. No problem, I said, forcing a smile. Dinner's almost ready. We ate together as a family, Claire laughing with the kids, making small talk as though nothing had changed. But every word out of her mouth felt like a lie. After dinner, I told her I had a late-night project to finish and retreated to my home office. The envelope Matt delivered sat on my desk, its contents burning a hole in my conscience. I opened it slowly, pulling out the stack of photos and the written report. There they were, Claire and Nathan, smiling at each other across a candlelit table, holding hands in a dimly lit bar, and, finally, entering his apartment. The time stamps didn't lie. My hands trembled as I sifted through the evidence. Each image was a knife to the heart, but it also steeled my resolve. This wasn't just about infidelity, it was about betrayal, about a life built on lies. I wasn't just some naive husband fooled by a fleeting affair. I was a man who deserved better, and I would ensure she understood that. The next morning, I prepared for the confrontation. While Claire showered, I slipped out and retrieved the small boxes I'd packed with her belongings from the basement. I left them by the front door, arranging them neatly so there could be no mistake. The envelope of evidence sat on top. Claire emerged from the bathroom, toweling her hair dry. She smiled at me as she walked past, unaware of what awaited her. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady. She paused, looking at me with mild concern. "Sure. What's up?" I gestured toward the living room. "Sit." Her expression shifted as she noticed the boxes. "What's going on?" I handed her the envelope. "Open it." She frowned but complied, her fingers fumbling slightly as she slid out the photos. Her face drained of color as she flipped through them, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "I can explain," she began, but I raised a hand to silence her. "Don't," I said coldly. "Don't insult me any further. The evidence speaks for itself." Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. "Mark, it was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I laughed bitterly. "A mistake? Claire, mistakes don't last for months. Mistakes don't involve hotel rooms and candlelit dinners. This was deliberate." Her tears spilled over, her voice trembling. "I love you. Please, don't do this." I shook my head. "You loved me. Then why did you throw away everything we built? For what? Him." I pointed to the photos. "Was it worth it?" She sobbed, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "No, Claire. You don't get to cry. Not now. I've already packed your things. Leave. Mark, the kids. I'll explain it to them. But you need to go. Now." She stared at me, her face a mix of despair and defiance. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," I said firmly. "Because you already did." Claire hesitated for a moment before gathering her things and walking toward the door. As it closed behind her, I felt a strange mix of pain and relief. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to walk. And I'd do it with my head held high. The house felt hollow after Claire left, as if her absence had drained it of warmth. I stood by the window, watching her drive away, her car disappearing into the darkened street. The night was silent save for the occasional rustle of leaves, and in that quiet, the weight of my decision settled over me. I had done what needed to be done, but it didn't feel like victory. My mind churned with questions. How had I missed the signs for so long? Could I have done something differently? The answers didn't matter anymore. The past was carved in stone, and my focus now was the future, one without Claire. The next morning, the children were the first challenge. Julia, our eldest, noticed the boxes by the door almost immediately. "Dad, why are Mom's things here?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. I knelt to her level, taking her small hands in mine. "Julia, there's something I need to tell you and Ethan. Let's sit down." Ethan joined us, his wide eyes filled with curiosity. I kept my explanation simple, omitting the ugliest details. "Your mom and I have decided to live separately for a while. It doesn't mean we don't love you. It just means that sometimes grown-ups have problems they can't fix." Julia's face crumpled. "Is it because of us?" I hugged her tightly, my chest aching. "No, sweetheart. This isn't your fault. It's not Ethan's fault, and it's not mine or your mom's. It's just something that happened." Ethan, too young to fully grasp the situation, leaned against me, his small voice trembling. "Will Mom come back?" "She'll visit," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "And we'll work through this together." The days that followed were a blur of logistical adjustments. I filed for divorce on Monday morning, making sure the paperwork included a strong case for custody. Claire's betrayal wasn't just a personal wound, it was evidence of poor judgment, something I couldn't ignore when it came to our children's future. The legal process was grueling, and every step felt like dragging an anchor. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Diane, assured me we had a solid case. "The court doesn't look kindly on infidelity, especially when children are involved," she said. Her confidence was reassuring, but it didn't make the reality any easier. Meanwhile, Claire tried to reach out. She called and texted constantly, her messages swinging between anger, desperation, and regret. "Mark, we can fix this. Please let me explain," one message read. Another, "You're tearing this family apart. Think about the kids." Her words no longer held any power over me. I'd thought about the kids, and the best thing for them was stability, a life free of lies and betrayal. One evening, a week after Claire's departure, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find her standing there, looking disheveled and pale. She clutched a folder, her hands trembling. "Mark, can we talk?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I hesitated before stepping aside. "Make it quick." She sat on the couch, her movements slow, as if weighed down by the enormity of her actions. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she began, her eyes fixed on the floor. "But I need you to understand. I never stopped loving you." I crossed my arms, standing firm. "You have a funny way of showing it." Her tears began to fall, but I remained unmoved. She pulled a photo from the folder, a picture of our family at the beach last summer. "This is what I want back," she said, her voice breaking. "I made a mistake, but I want to fix it. For us. For the kids." I scoffed, the bitterness rising. "A mistake? Claire, you don't trip and fall into someone else's bed. You don't plan secret meetings and hide behind lies if you're in love with your husband." She flinched, her tears flowing freely. "I was lost, Mark. I thought. I don't even know what I thought. But I swear, it didn't mean anything." "Stop lying to yourself," I said coldly. "It meant enough for you to risk everything we built. And now you expect me to pick up the pieces like nothing happened. She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. The divorce is happening, Claire. You can fight it or accept it, but this, I gestured to the photo in her hand, this is over. She stared at me, broken and defeated. I'll do anything to make this right, she whispered. Then leave, I said. The best thing you can do for me, for the kids, is to let us move on. After Claire left that night, the house felt lighter, as though her presence had been a shadow I didn't know was there. I focused on creating a new routine for the kids, one filled with laughter, love, and as much normalcy as I could muster. They deserved a life untainted by betrayal, and I was determined to give it to them. But I wasn't done. Claire had torn my world apart, and while I wouldn't stoop to vindictiveness, I wouldn't let her walk away unscathed. Her affair partner, Nathan, wasn't just a footnote in this story, he was an active participant in my misery. And he needed to understand the consequences of his actions. I began gathering information on him, reaching out to Matt for another favor. The plan was simple, I'd expose him for who he truly was. People like Nathan thrived in the shadows, but I intended to shine a light so bright it would leave him nowhere to hide. If Nathan thought he could waltz into my life, take what he wanted, and walk away unchallenged, he was sorely mistaken. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about justice. And justice, I had decided, would be served. The weeks turned into months, and my life began to settle into a new rhythm. The divorce was finalized with little resistance from Claire, she seemed too broken to fight back. I got full custody of the kids, the house, and a sense of closure I never thought I'd find. The wounds she left still stung, but the scars were forming, and I was learning how to live with them. Nathan had also disappeared. Matt's investigation uncovered that he was already embroiled in legal troubles at work, facing accusations of financial misconduct. The information I'd quietly fed to his employer only hastened his downfall. By the time the dust settled, Nathan was unemployed and disgraced, leaving Claire to deal with the fallout of her choices alone. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But peace, it seemed, was not meant to last. It was a chilly Saturday morning when the knock came at the door. I was in the kitchen, making pancakes for the kids, who were still in their pajamas, laughing and arguing over toppings. The sound was sharp and insistent, cutting through the warmth of the moment. "Stay here," I told Julia and Ethan as I walked toward the door. My stomach tightened with unease, visitors were rare these days. When I opened the door, Claire stood there. She was thinner than I remembered, her eyes hollow but burning with something I couldn't place. She clutched a manila envelope tightly in her hands. "Mark," she said, her voice unsteady. "We need to talk." I stiffened. "There's nothing left to talk about." "Please," she whispered, her eyes pleading. "This is important. For you. For the kids." Reluctantly, I stepped aside. She entered hesitantly, her gaze flitting toward the living room where the kids were. "Can we talk in private?" she asked. I nodded, leading her to the kitchen. Once the door closed behind us, she placed the envelope on the table, her hands trembling. "What is this?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. "Proof," she said, her voice cracking. "Proof that I wasn't the only one keeping secrets." I frowned, my chest tightening. "What are you talking about?" She slid the envelope across the table. "Open it." I hesitated, then tore it open, pulling out a stack of papers and photographs. The first was a letter, a hospital record. As I skimmed the document, my breath caught in my throat. It was a paternity test. Ethan's name was listed at the top, followed by two names, Claire's, and mine. The result, exclusion of paternity. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. This can't be right." "It's true," Claire said, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan isn't yours." My legs gave out, and I sank into the nearest chair, the papers trembling in my hands. How? How could you keep this from me? I didn't know for sure, she said, her voice raw. I swear, Mark, I didn't know. Ethan was conceived during a time when I made another mistake. But I convinced myself he was yours. I wanted to believe it. And after everything that happened between us, I couldn't keep lying. I stared at her, my mind racing. Ethan, my son, my flesh and blood in every way that mattered, wasn't biologically mine. The betrayal I thought I had overcome roared back to life, threatening to consume me. Why now? I asked, my voice low and cold. Why tell me this now? Because you deserve the truth, she said. And because Ethan deserves to know someday. I didn't want him to find out from someone else. I clenched my fists, my anger barely contained. Who is his father? Her silence was answer enough. Nathan, I spat, the name like venom on my tongue. She nodded, her tears falling faster. It was just one night. Before I even knew what we'd become, before I knew what he'd take from me. From us. My heart pounded, my thoughts spiraling into chaos. Ethan wasn't mine. Nathan had taken more than my wife, he had stolen my family, my identity as a father. Hours passed after Claire left, her confession hanging in the air like a storm cloud. I sat alone in the kitchen, the evidence spread before me. The kids had gone to bed, blissfully unaware of the earthquake that had shattered the foundation of their lives. I thought about Ethan, his laugh, his smile, the way he looked up to me. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up with him when he was sick, the times I'd cheered him on at soccer games. He was mine, regardless of what the papers said. Biology didn't define our bond. But Nathan had to know. He had to feel the weight of what he'd done. The next day, I paid him a visit. He lived in a rundown apartment now, his once pristine life in ruins. When he opened the door, his smug expression dissolved into fear at the sight of me. Mark, he began, but I cut him off. You've taken everything from me, I said, my voice low and steady. But you'll never take Ethan. He's my son, not yours. And you'll never have a place in his life. Nathan stammered, but I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked away, leaving him to wallow in the mess he'd created. In the weeks that followed, I found a strange sense of peace. The truth was out, and while it had shaken me to my core, it had also solidified something. My love for Ethan was unbreakable. He was my son in every way that mattered, and I would fight for him with everything I had. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me with wide, trusting eyes. Dad, will you always be here? I smiled, my heart swelling with fierce determination. Always, buddy. Always. And as I turned off the light and closed his door, I realized that no matter what had been taken from me, I still had what mattered most, my children, my strength, and the unyielding resolve to rebuild. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning.